I'm Dr. Victoria Cann. I'm a lecturer here at the UEA and I specialise in cultural politics and feminist methodologies. But I have many hats. All of them are glued very tightly onto my head, so they're all just kind of stacked on top of each other right now. I am the founder of Norwich Feminist Network, which has been going since 2012, I think. Some of our older members are here, so long-term members, I shouldn't say older members. And I set that up because I knew that there were a lot of feminists in Norwich, but there didn't seem to be much of a forum for us to get together and to speak about these sorts of things. And that's been a wonderful journey, I suppose you could call it that, where we've met, we've had fun times, we've had arguments, and it's just been a really wonderful kind of consciousness-raising exercise. People come along for one meeting and they might not come back again, and we have some people who come along time after time. Another hat that I wear is as co-founder of Day for Girl Norwich. That is a community empowerment group which works with young people to help girls recognise the rights that they have, as well as to get boys involved in the conversation to see how that they can engage in making the world a better place for girls. And then I've also got a hat on today as a person who's published an article on the representation of women in the press. It was called Representations of Female Politicians in the Press, Prada, Politics and Power. And so to respond to your first question, Aja, I think that the problem isn't necessarily that we're not seeing women in the press, it's how they are being represented when they are being sort of shown. So what we did in this research project was I went down to the Colindale Library where all of the newspaper archives were kept, and I read not every newspaper, I did not do that, but I read every newspaper from a series in 1992, from 2002, and then from 2012, and we recorded how women politicians were represented. That's British politicians. And what we found was that women in 1992 kind of got a better deal than they do in 2012. We found that under the Conservative government, women made up 9.2% of MPs, and they got 9% of the coverage in the press. Under the Labour government in 2002, they made up 17.9% of MPs and were represented 17% of the time. And then under the coalition in 2012, women made up 22%, which is still dire. But then when it came to representation, they were only represented 16% of the time. So actually, proportionately, women were being represented less. And also in terms of the quotes, so we actually heard women's voices being referred to less often in news stories as well. So one argument that we made was that female politicians are being rendered less visible over the course of these 20 years. And also, I think that there are many headlines that we can think about in terms of Blair's babes, Cameron's cuties. Busty Jackie was one of them. Jackie Smith was referred to as Busty Jackie Smith in The Sun once, in a kind of page 3 parody. Strange that The Sun were parodying page 3 politicians. It's a confusing world. Twinkle Toes Theresa May, and Theresa May is often being referred to in terms of what shoes she's wearing on any particular day. We had Louise Mensch and Marie Doris, where they had a cat fight, is what it was referred to. But also, even in The Guardian, the more left-wing-ish ones, we had the conference catwalk was referred to as well. And so, one of the things I guess I'm concerned about as a feminist media studies person is the way in which politicians are male, and then they are othered if women. So for those of you familiar with Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, I think really we haven't come very far in terms of women's politics where, you know, male politician equals the norm, and then women is other, and they are kind of marked as other in different ways. So that's a concern. And obviously there are lots of other things, like Laura Bates talking about forms of casual everyday sexism in Parliament, so calm down dear, those sorts of things, which we should be familiar with. And I also found a story about, has anyone heard of Top Totty, the beer that was in Parliament? In 2007, a Conservative MP, so no surprises, brought in a beer, an ale from their local constituency, and it was called Top Totty. And the picture on the beer, like the tap head, was a busty woman in hardly any clothes, and they were selling that in the House of Commons bar. And it wasn't until 2012 when Kate Green, a Labour MP, said that she was offended by that, and it was taken off the shelves. The right-wing media thought that was political correctness gone mad. And then actually, when it was banned, Top Totty, the beer, sold out within 3 days. So even when we kind of acknowledge that there are problems, capitalism finds its way to kind of spin things and sell sexism. So those are my hats, and that's my take on this thing. But as a specialist in identity politics, I'm also really keen to think about politics outside of Parliament, and the ways in which sort of subversive media production, so I make a lot of zines, can act as a kind of democratising space and kind of free people from those constraints. And I'm also keen to talk about how we can engage young people, particularly girls, in the political system, either for politics or not. And I think actually maybe, Kate, what you were saying about the internet's a really good space for doing that. So that's my spiel. I'll pass you on, and we can have a chat hopefully at a roundtable style discussion.